We'll be starting in about 5 minutes. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming out. I want to say my name is Joe Adkins. I'm with the planning department. From a planning perspective, the past weekend has been very exciting. We have been talking about a form-based code in the city of Frederick for the last 10 years. And this past weekend, we finally got the design charrette going. Our consultant team got your thoughts together, and what they're going to present tonight is the beginning of our form-based code effort. So after this, there will be a lot more analysis, writing of the code, vetting it, and all the things that go in with regulations. But the fun part that we had this weekend, and I might steal a little of Jason's thunder, but Friday night we had 75 people. Saturday we had about 50 people that came out in the morning. And then on Sunday, when there was no program going on, we had 30 people just come in and talk to the consultants about various things. So obviously it's important to the city, but it's important to you all as well. I want to thank you all for coming to the City Hall so that we could record this and televise it on TV so we can reach a broader audience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason from Stantec. He can introduce his team and he can begin the program.
One of our members is rolling up in the middle. No. All right. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out, and everybody who's online, thank you for attending. It's great to have multiple options for people to engage. We've had a great 5 days. How many, just by show of hands, how many of you have been to any of the events, either Friday, Saturday, dropped in on the studio? So well over half of you. So thank you for doing that. This is not over, but what we've done over the last several days is really started to capture the vision from the community. So we really thank you. Members of the consulting team, if you would raise your hands just so everybody knows where you are. So we've had this consulting team out here throughout the last 5 days. Actually, over the last several weeks and months, we have started to explore East Frederick and the context of the community and really understand what makes Frederick work and East Frederick work. So along with our team, and you can see on the screen here who we're made up of, but we've worked together a lot, but really it's about teaming with the community and hearing from you about what your vision is for East Frederick. So what we've been doing over these last 5 days is really listening, being sponges, taking in what you've had to say. We will present throughout the night. You'll start to see some of the visioning that we've pulled together from what we've heard from you. We'll talk about the process a little bit later, but ultimately, as Joe had mentioned, this will be a regulation, essentially the new development regulations or replacing the zoning for what can and can't happen in East Frederick. And we'll kind of explore that as we go tonight. But again, thank you for coming out, contributing your vision and your local knowledge. It really helps us. We are a somewhat local team, so we have some familiarity, but it's really been helpful to have you as our teammates throughout this process. So as you can see here, this is a map of our study area. Those of you who have been involved are familiar with that. Where we are in the process, you can see 6 key steps there. We're in that 3rd step, so we're in this public design process. We'll talk a little bit about what led up to that. But moving forward, leaving this and with the information we've gathered and the vision that we've started to formulate, and actually we don't want to solidify this vision until this is all the way done. We want to continue to hear from you and make sure that till the very end we get this right from the community's perspective. So we're going to go back and start to draft the code based on what we've heard. We're going to refine that code, and then we're going to come back out to the community, ultimately to an approval process in this room to adopt that as the new regulations for this area. So, understanding the form-based code. What we've been doing and is talking about form-based code. We're not going to go in depth tonight. If you've been out to any of the events, you are starting to hopefully understand what this entails. But I will point you to this website, which is on the city's website. There is a form-based code website dedicated to this process. So would ask that you go there, and this is a great primer to learn what a form-based code is, or feel free to talk to staff. All right, so understanding East Frederick. When we started this process, we really looked at the existing documents that are in place. For decades, there has been visioning and thinking behind what happens here. And finally, given these documents and what we've gathered, this is really the right time to move this vision forward. So based in all of these previous documents, there are great recommendations, and we piece all of these. We're taking this all as input into what we're doing. We've gone out and looked at the site context. We have put many miles on our shoes on the corridor, talking to stakeholders. Joe mentioned all the people that came out, but even leading up to these 5 days of meetings, we've spoken to dozens of stakeholders and had focus group meetings with employees, residents, developers, builders up and down the corridor to fully understand this. So we've looked at your streets and buildings. When we develop a form-based code, we really want to understand the context of what we're developing and understanding the walkability of the area and what we can do to improve that, understanding the architecture and the materials that go into building these, the developments. We look at the dwellings, if there's future housing, how is that going to fit into the context of Frederick? One thing we've learned is that people in Frederick want to maintain the character of Frederick, and when new development happens in East Frederick, it should absolutely do that. So we think about how do we capture that in the vision. It's looking at the context of what's out there, building upon that, making it better, making it more pedestrian friendly. So we walked the area, we really got to understand how people get around, what parks and open spaces people frequent. And then these are the things we want to mimic when East Frederick grows and develops. Pull these pieces, the pieces that people like, we want to see those replicated elsewhere. An extension of downtown, the comfort, the walkability of downtown, we heard that a lot. And the alleyways. We walked a lot of alleyways. So Joe mentioned the Friday night kickoff. If you had a chance to do the visual preference survey, we got a lot of votes on that. This was an exercise where we asked individuals to put green or red stickers on things, green stickers on environments they liked, red on those they don't like. So what this does is give us a really nice snapshot of the public realm elements, the dwellings, the parking solutions that the community prefers. And then we had our public kickoff where Jeff did a really great job of welcoming the community, explaining a form-based code and how it's going to function and what our process moving forward is going to be. As Joe mentioned, we had a great turnout, 70 plus individuals that Friday night. So I think Frederick, the community is doing a great job of turning out. We've done a lot of these processes, and I will say this is one of the more solid ones I've seen from community participation, so you could be proud of yourselves. We did a few polling questions that night, and that was pretty interesting and telling. You know, how do you get to East Frederick, and once you're in East Frederick, how do you get around? And it was really interesting. We did not know what to expect on this one. Biking, 4%. So 2 people in the survey actually use a bike to get around. We know there's demand in the people we talk to, so are there ways to make it easier to bike? But walking in automobile use to get to the corridor and get around the corridor was pretty even, around 50% each. We asked individuals to describe how East Frederick is today, and you can see the middle, the larger words got more votes. Industrial, lots of potential. I think that's a key word to look at. And then describe East Frederick in the future. What's your vision for Frederick in one word? Connected, walkable, vibrant, green. These are all terms that we heard over and over throughout these 5 days. And then I'm going to pass it on to Jeff, and you're going to pick up on Saturday's hands-on.
I'll stand. I thought I was going to be able to sit, but then you wouldn't see me. The hands-on session, this is key to this whole process, where we put pencils in your hands, and there's someone at your table, a facilitator, helping, this for the people who weren't there, lead you through so you don't just miss anything or concentrate entirely on one area and not the other. But we had an excellent turnout. We were stuffed. That's an early version. People working on the tables, really good results. The energy in the room was as good as I've ever seen it. People actually started working before we said go, and put a lot of ink and pencil on the paper. You see here. And all discussing the future, what they wanted, what they didn't want. And these are small groups, and they're having to come to some kind of agreement. And this is what we think you told us. Now, I want to stress this is a work in progress. We're hitting the high notes here because you told us a lot more than this. But here are some of the table drawings. And we'll zoom in on those. There's a lot of information on these. What we did was we looked through these and started to see the consistencies, and there's a high degree of consistency. And this really isn't close enough. We've got some pretty good resolution photos. If anyone wants to see these in the future, we're gonna, I think we can put them online, and you can look at them. We did, but you see, even from just the marks at this distance, there's a ton of information, people talking about really specific, place-specific things, not just, I want to see a stadium, an aquarium, this, that, and the other. Say, I want to see something here, this should be improved in this way. Talking about this is a citizen talking about the idea of distributed parking garages for shared parking. And this is what we heard, and this is also why we're doing this. You may want to fill in the blanks or tell us with the survey we're going to give you at the end of this, and it's going to be online, what we missed, and we're also going to ask you, did we get the balance right? So this is kind of a mid-course correction opportunity for all of us. Oh. And the slide says what I just said. We're going to hand out a survey. And I think more than 4 issues is okay. You can put in 6 if you want. Another thing we heard besides those, there were a set of issues of things that real concerns people had about some of the people qualities of this place. And on these, the reason they're all together is the answer, as you see at the bottom of the screen. We could say the form-based code can help with these, some of them, like affordability. Traditional towns have different kinds of living, from apartments, big houses, small houses, carriage houses, row houses, that are different ways and different costs, different kind of expensive houses. But that only goes so far. If you want good affordable housing and that's serious, it's really going to take some extra programs and extra commitment. And the form-based code for those kinds of issues, by the way, neighborhood business retention is a really tough thing to do, but it's really important. It's one of my big goals, but it needs champions. So the form-based code can make some things easy. It can make small-scale development easy. It removes a lot of obstacles, but for these things to happen, affordable housing, affordable business, the whole city has to make some policy decisions and have some programs to approach them. And I will say, as a group, and we had a number of meetings with neighborhoods, came up in, if perhaps in all of them, and you all are quite serious about this, and really it's important to having a decent city. We've all known, and I see Seth back there, another new urbanist. We've worked in places where they have to bus the people in to teach the schools, the police, nobody can live there. And that doesn't make for a really healthy community. You know, your teachers, your policemen, your town planners are all strangers because they have to live somewhere else. Much healthier community if it's got a place for everybody. So we're quite serious about that, but we can only do so much. You know, the burden was going to stay with you. Anita's going to talk about dollars and cents.
So I'm Anita Morrison. I'm the market economist on the team. And what we've been seeing and looking at in preparing for the plan and looking at the market potentials, the market is really very supportive for new housing and for some additional retail development and a downtown hotel. We don't really see an opportunity for much in the way of office, except maybe second floor office for professionals and the like. So, okay. What we see is an opportunity to serve a lot of different markets, a lot of different types of people, and to bring in greater density, greater intensity of the housing. That gives you more people to support the local businesses and to generate pedestrian activity on the street, particularly for a much larger part of East Street than has been the norm historically. So we think that will be very important to support downtown retail and then the retail that happens on East Street. Well, I want you to maintain the retail concentration. Retail really fares much better if it's concentrated and clustered so that the shoppers can go from place to place and see one shop while they're stopping by another one. So we want, and we also want you to think about it judiciously so that you don't just willy-nilly start saying every street needs to have retail on it, because that just sets you up to build way too much and undermine the viability of those businesses. So we'd like you to focus really along East Street and a little bit to the edges, around the corner, from Patrick to about 3rd Street, that'll keep the energy going and not overly compete with the rest of downtown. And then in the longer term, as we see the opportunities to redevelop Monocacy Village Center, we think that's another opportunity for a cluster of a different kind of retail that's more oriented to your day-to-day needs and convenience. We want to keep in mind to right-size the parking. Things are changing. People are making different decisions about how many cars they need to own and how often they're going to use their cars. And the more we can make the environment supportive of walking and biking, the less parking we will need. So we push that because parking really carries a high cost. It's literally very expensive to build, particularly when we need to go to structured parking. And what that means is it affects the rents, it affects the costs of the housing. It wastes a lot of valuable land. It interrupts the flow of people as they're walking along the street. And so we want to make sure that you don't overbuild the parking, that you take advantage of opportunities to share parking where possible. And then finally, to zone for his housing variety, for that whole range of small infill, small apartment buildings with 6 to 15 units, say, and then the larger ones that can give you the sort of level of construction or level of activity that you need. This says 20 to 50, we would say, there actually are larger opportunities as well that could get you to 250 units even. And then townhouses, again, judiciously, not as the norm and the overwhelming majority of what's built new, but there are going to be some locations where they are very appropriate for blending with the existing development. The form-based code is really going to help you facilitate the development. What happens in development is it really depends on the decisions of private investors and private developers to build what you're looking for and what you would like to see. So the code will help make that much more clear in terms of exactly what the community is looking for. It will help the developers understand what they need to build in order to be responsive to the community, and it greatly improves the predictability. That's one of the hobgoblins of development, is that you just don't know when you start a project what the community will accept, what the local government will accept, and that means that you're taking a bigger risk. So if we can reduce that risk and improve the predictability so that they know what they need to build in order to be approved, that will help the whole system and reduce the time it takes to get to development.
There we go. All right, now some visualization, some ideas of what things that could happen. And you'll see this, we're stressing time and time again, this is a work in progress. So you'll see some things, a few things that are very finished and maybe even slick, and some things that are a little rougher and partway there. Here's the study area, and you see the existing map, and it's a figure ground of the buildings. One thing I'd point out, if you look at most of it, especially the downtown, even there are no property lines there, just the buildings themselves. You can see the streets and blocks. You can see the system. Part of what we're doing is extending that. And this is the draft, the early draft plan for the streets and block network on the east side. And we'll zoom in a little bit. But it's starting to extend the grid connections so that east and west are knit together, and north-south. Here's a little bit of a close-up. There are a series of new green spaces, some small pocket parks, some fairly sizable greens, starting up at Monocacy Village or Uptown. A small one that would be more like a square, that could be a focused gathering space for that area. And you see how they filter down. Also down, the red stripes, they should be green, but they didn't show. You wouldn't be able to see them. That's the idea of extending the more pedestrianized area of the creek, the next step down. And then on the very top, let's see if the laser works. Right there is an example of looking at places where you can make easy connections. That's actually a connection to a trail to this greenway there. We've been looking for opportunities like that. So it's an interconnected system. You walk in those streets, and there's an idea that we're kind of close to, about a 2.5-minute walk. If you're in that area, you can come to one of those greens, one of those small parks or large parks. You see the interconnected street network. I'm going to talk about some of the streets. Actually, let me take a second, if I can. You see something a little different in the upper right? Those brown footprints. I might have to do this a bit. Those brown footprints are a project that just got approved. And it's a little bit out of, it's a little bit different. It's surrounded by, it'll have parking lots on its perimeter. Sorry, I apologize for that. There's an automatic advance. But we found a way to connect through it. So that part is going to be connected to the system as well. We're talking about some streets like this. Now, there are a number of places on the east side where there are existing right-of-ways, and so you have to fit a street into some fairly tight spaces, just like on on the west side in downtown. This is one that would fit in a 46 or a 48-foot about right-of-way, and you see the kind of things we're putting there and the things we value. There's a wide sidewalk, a decent sidewalk, a decent area to plant the trees so that those trees will grow and get bigger. It's a little bit, we're being a little bit more generous with the trees than in downtown, so you'll get a higher percentage, they'll grow faster, you'll have a higher percentage of success. And if you think about walking downtown, how much the trees, and I think they're all superheroes for growing in really constrained environments, but those trees, it's like a ceiling. If those trees were gone, your great streets would come down a big notch. And that's saying a lot, because your streets are great. There's some cases, here's a section that's really skinny, a 39 or 40, and these exist. There are other options, like you may have trees on only one side, parking on one side. That one lane, one way could be 2 lanes. So there's some options, but in all cases, we want to maintain a 6-foot sidewalk, maybe a 5-foot. And in really busy areas, you can have paving over in between the trees. So as a pedestrian, you see the clear sidewalk, which is completely unimpeded, and you also get that area between the trees that could be paved. Say if there's a shop there or a cafe, you could have tables. And here's the street where we are able to establish new streets and actually new right-of-ways. This would be the full street. It's got 2 lanes, on-street parking, generous tree lawn area, a good sidewalk, and you see the 2 feet on either side? We call that a dooryard, but basically that's the area that's in private property. So things like if someone wants to put, they can pave it if it's a shop or put bricks on it, or they can have some flowers, et cetera. But they can also have their stoop or their steps come out, so they're not coming out and making your sidewalk shorter. So it's kind of maintaining that clear sidewalk area stays completely clear. So these streets would have a really healthy tree canopy. And we're also talking about narrow streets that approach that area for legitimate sharrows where bicycle riding in the street works comfortably. Now I'm going to talk about an overview, and this is really preliminary stuff. The other, the design and the plan we've worked on and talked about a lot more, but the idea of the different characters. First, I'll talk about the idea of shop fronts, where you would say, new construction, you'll need to build on your ground floor a shop front. So these are the areas we're saying we really want to be a center where there's retail activity. The one on top is Monocacy Village, or Uptown. I think we got that right. Any new construction, of course, now that's already retail in Uptown. So it's meeting with what the place already is to a pretty fair degree. And an idea that maybe, and we want your feedback on this, this is an idea that new buildings could be, say, 4.5 stories. The half would be like an attic story, someone in the roof with dormers. And then down along East Street, between about, I'd say 3.5, it goes to the alley. And then down halfway back to the creek, new buildings would have shop fronts there. And we'll talk about the rest. I'm talking here about kind of the special conditions. Generally, we're quite flexible in the form-based code, so people could build shops elsewhere if they wanted to, but this is the place we'd really reinforce it. And it is following the current pattern. Actually, in your downtown, the retail on Market is about that same area. Here's another kind of a special place. When 7th Street gets extended, it can, and I would suggest should be, just coming straight over. There's enough distance between the street and the northern or the back property line of those houses, which I think some of you live in, that new houses could be constructed. So that would be a normal situation with houses backing up to houses. And because of the scale of the existing houses north of the study area, anything that would be built there, we'd keep down no taller than 3 stories, and would logically probably be 2. And they'd be up to the front of the street, so you've had backyards facing backyards. If anybody's building on the street, the idea is these wouldn't be the really big 4- and 5-story and 6-story buildings. They'd be more like closer in scale to the buildings in that neighborhood up to the north of it. And then another thing we're looking at, and this is tied in with one of the examples you'll see later, the area around 5th Street where Food Pro is and the substation, and then a potential street that's coming up the other side of the power lines. We'd call that a kind of, in the old language you might say light industrial, but we're really talking about smaller scale, new construction, smaller scale shops where you're trying to encourage, call it, the term is maker spaces, light industrial or artist spaces, or people who are making things at a small scale. So it's kind of like, it can also serve as an incubator for new businesses. And part of that is a realization that, let's face it, that's an industrial area right now. You know, you've got Food Pro, the substation, they're there, and you know, they really, that's what the character is. If the block to the east of it, to the west of it rather, were to get developed, you know, it's going to be enveloped in that character, and it should start off understanding that's what it is. Seems like a logical place to put that in the tables. A lot of people talked about areas for artists and artisans. This could be that kind of thing. And it would be, I'm thinking, people who, you know, would not think they're moving into, they're going to look out the window and see Mayberry right there. You know, they know what they're getting into, and that's fine with them. And then talking about the general area, sometimes people say a form-based code use doesn't matter. Well, with those exceptions, we're thinking, our beginning thought to be fine-tuned is that the vast majority of the area has very flexible uses. The form of the building is controlled, but people would have the option. If they wanted to build a shop on the ground floor, they could, but they'd understand that's at their own risk. But they also could build office buildings or all residential buildings. So just like in your downtown spaces, which have changed, these buildings have changed use over, is it a couple hundred years? A lot of flexibility, but the basic form of the building makes the beautiful street spaces. These would be very flexible in use and in height, and we're just beginning that. We've talked, but I didn't feel confident putting anything down tonight about perhaps there's a difference and more height on the southern end, less height on the upper end, and we'd like some input and advice from you on that as well. And then one other thing I want to add, we've had some thoughts about, and this is preliminary, but we're interested in perhaps adding that area to the form-based code. And some of it is we're seeing additional connections that could be made. And some of it is the Housing Authority came to talk to us, which is right in the lower left corner by Sagner Park. Did I say it right this time? That's the first time. And the Housing Authority is interested in redeveloping that and actually upgrading what they've got. So there's an opportunity there to plug that in. And also a general thought that that would make sense at a smaller scale because there's so many existing houses there. We're thinking about Pennsylvania, Maryland, and I forgot the other street, which is Hamilton, sorry. I knew it until just now. So that's an area we're going to see if we might add to the study area. Stressing the work in progress and asking all of you on the survey, et cetera, to give us your reactions and your thoughts about that. Now we're going to hop into some big ideas. Now now you're down in the brickwork area. And here's a what if. You see a pattern of streets and blocks, and the way we've drawn it, these are all going to be tree-lined, wide sidewalks, and the system of parks and greens. Let me see if I can do that. This is east. Here's the railroad. The train station is right up here. So this is the roundabout that right now is the roundabout to nowhere. This would give it somewhere, kind of establish this main street, which then starts to connect. The red arrow is going to be your viewpoint, an idea about if you were standing there, what some of those greens might look like. And this is, you take raw land, and that regulating plan lays down where the buildings go, where the streets are, where the green is. And then you start to populate it. And it's a combination of things of the public sector and the private sector. And the buildings pretty much all get built by the private sector and developers. Well, you can shape what they build and make it a decent thing. And streets that you feel good riding a bicycle on. Version of that for Monocacy Village. An aerial photograph. This is what it's like now. And also I want to stress, especially since I see that we have Belisarios. People say good things. People say good things about your pizza is here, but this is what it is today. And when Justin was developing this, he was looking at ways it could be phased. So you could build a piece of it, not as opposed to bulldozing the whole thing, throwing everybody out and say, well, if you're still around in 2 years, you can come back in. This could allow some phasing. Here's an idea of sort of a representation in a drawing. This is what it is now, as just those kind of tofu blocks. It's building form. This could perhaps be a phase one. Always a lot of tree planting, a grove of trees there. But a first phase on the southern end of it, multi-story buildings, shops on the ground floor, where ideally you'd like to have some of those users, some of those shops move in. And this is where, fingers crossed and high expectations. There's a program to help subsidize, say, the first few years of those businesses moving over to a new store. And by the way, a good chance to emphasize, in a form-based code, nobody has to do nothing until they want. And they can keep doing and keep it exactly as it is in perpetuity. They would only make a change like this when they choose to. And yes, I do understand that's the landowner, not the business operator. So there is that aspect. That's why we have to have those programs to help tilt the scales in favor of the neighborhood-oriented businesses. And here's the idea of what it could eventually become. It now there's still parking in front on street. The main amount of the big parking is in back. There's going to be neighbors around who walk to it. And then this little place here is like an urban square, a gathering focal point, a brilliant place to have a coffee shop or an ice cream shop. And there's also the possibility in this of a small grocery store being in one of these buildings. We've heard a lot from people about food deserts. All right, now I'm jumping way down to the southern end. That's 2nd Street on the bottom of the picture and where it intersects with Church. I don't know if the taxi business there is a landmark for everyone. For some reason it is for us. Maybe it's because in the aerial photo, the yellow cabs all stand out. So here's a what if, and by the way, we have discussed this with the landowner, not the specific configuration, so I'm keeping my eye on him, But he had talked about and is open and interested in this concept. This is the way it is today. When we first came to town, as soon as we saw that, we thought, wow, that's a great neighborhood park. And we understand there are events there. And by the way, the landowner planted those trees, which is a great thing. Now, this is not a small change, we understand. But notice on the foreground, most of those houses are there. Those are the very same houses. Now, there is a business. Okay, you live there? Okay. There also is, there's a larger building with a kind of cruciform roof. There's a business there, and we're assuming that business is located nearby in the county in a good industrial area, and they made some good money by the sale of their property. But if you look at that, multi-story building, but oh, darn it. Sorry, I'm not good with machinery. But here, maybe there's on this corner, maybe that's a shop. Somebody puts a small store there. Could be a store here or here. But all of these don't have to be stores. And there's also an idea that these are the existing houses. Here's where the big brick wall is. That blank red brick wall is right about here. And there's also an idea about a new street that connects down towards the creek. So you see how it is very possible for this, and it's taking advantage of the local features. It's providing development opportunities, and it's providing what is probably a lot more housing. Let me go one more time. We didn't get them exactly lined up, but close. And fitting in with the existing houses. And we assumed, I don't know where the taxi storage went, but they're not here. They're a little, we'll say they're a little farther away in a county industrial area. And this is going down to East Street. This is the property just across, just west of the power lines from Food Pro. Okay, now we're in a helicopter or something, a drone up over the west side of East Street. Here's East Street, here's the substation. By the way, there's a little bit of property here that apparently the Potomac Edison owns it, but they're open to maybe doing something with it. I mean, not a house or houses, but there's something we could do there to kind of hide the substation and maybe make it a little more interesting. But we're talking about this property right here. This, let's see, this is where in some future 6th Street would go through, but that's a while. So, and actually these are not aligned up because 6th Street suddenly jumped way over here. So 6th Street would come over to give access to this. And this is an idea about both development on East Street, so it has a little more presence, could be mixed use, or also these could be all residential. Those are both options. And then something we're doing, there's enough space behind these so they have some breathing room, and you would sure plant maybe a green wall, plant trees against that parking structure. The parking structure is there as part of an idea for a parking sink. This might be a kind of public-private partnership, but for this area, a lot of that parking would be shared parking. And for instance, if there are restaurants just down the way, like Pisaro's, I know I mispronounced it, but Pistaro's and Belisarios. They might have a valet where they could send people up there. I'll get to you. And then behind it is a parking structure. There's also a little bit of space back there. Oh, damn. Now I'm embarrassed. A little bit of space behind that. Oh, see, I'm getting a preview. Okay. A little bit of space behind it. So it's quite crowded, but that's 70 feet behind the big building to the parking structure. and I've forgotten the number, maybe Justin will remember it, but there's a lot of parking spaces there. Some would be used by this building, but there's a lot of extra that could be used by the surrounding community or restaurants with valet parking. 700? What was the number? I think in the 3 bay. Okay, this one has 3 bays, which is, yes. 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 3 levels above ground, and there's an option for 2 bays, 120 feet deep, possibly 3 bays. Now, the 3 bay, that's a really big parking structure, but those are options.
We can, ma'am, we can take questions. We'll take questions at the end if that's.
And I'm
if you
gonna-
please hold your question.
Could you hold your question? I promise we'll get to you. And the problem is I'm talking too much, and I'm going to try and speed up and get to those questions. I can't help myself. Okay, now we're going to jump down. Do you recognize the post office property? Here is East Street, Patrick. And we all know what happens now is there's a 4-lane section, and right here it runs into the bottleneck where you go from 4 to 2, 3-ish. This is really about the post office property redeveloping, but here's that property, and you see the post office, if it completely redevelops, how much, this is like a huge site. Right now, here's the parking area, a little finger going there, but one of the things this does is, and I hope some of the people who live here are present, it provides an alley that goes to the back of all these units. So if you have one of those houses, you can have a parking space, and I think you would build a little garage back there. So you can put your car and your stuff and your tools. Yes. And I have to mention that I think maybe you know oh, damn. There's also the idea for parking structure here, which we haven't drawn that. There's all sorts of discussions about structures here or the other side of the creek. But you see this scheme, the post office is a huge redevelopment opportunity. It's important, and the code would make sure that that isn't one big building that looks like the battleship Galactica that somehow landed here, but it's broken down into smaller increments. All right. Now I'm going to talk about some decisions about the street space, because one thing, and I'm not sure how apparent it is, the East Street redesign study put out some options, but there are a lot of things it didn't resolve. There are a lot of choices to be made. We're wrestling with that, and we want to kind of present to you somewhat the issue. There are historic buildings and great buildings that are right up to the street, right up to the property line. You have really constrained conditions, and those buildings are not going to move. If it was a 7-Eleven, you could talk about that's going to be redeveloped. These buildings aren't, and they shouldn't move, so there's a rock and a hard place. But first, a really pretty picture of the post office redevelopment. That's what you see today. And this is our man, Steve Price, who does the photo imaging. And you see here, I'm having trouble getting my clicker. There we go. Bike lane with some protection on it, through lane. Here, a left turn lane, which is really necessary just to bleed that off. If someone stops on a 2-lane street to turn left, they freeze the whole lane behind them. And here you see, this is all opportunities for new development. Because when you start to build on this and make the street a space, it becomes a really positive place for people to live on the upper floors, shops on the ground floor. And by the way, here's your replacement, one option for replacement of the post office parking lot. Now, photograph of the existing condition. there's really between Patrick and 4th Street, some varied conditions, but it is hugely constrained. You know, the sidewalks vary from one side to the other. Sometimes they're okay. Sometimes they're really like almost like a tightrope. They vary, and this is about the only place where there's parking. And this is a proposal, 33 feet curb to curb. I'm sorry, this is the existing condition, shown kind of abstractly. Roughly a 7-foot on-street parking, 2 13-foot travel lanes. That's like the lane width on the freeway, so that's a lot more than you need, and it kind of helps people, makes you want to speed up if you're in a car. Here's an alternate when we look at that. It's 2 11-foot travel lanes, a reasonable landscape strip so those trees would grow and thrive and give you canopy shade. And also, in addition to the canopy shade, if you're a driver, they start to close the area in, and that's visual friction on drivers is really what governs how fast they drive. It's not the sign. I know that's the way I drive. The sign can say one thing, but you just tend to drive in a way you feel comfortable. So those trees help both in slowing the cars down, environmental issues, and they make the pedestrians more comfortable, especially in the summertime. And then a decent sidewalk on each side. Now here's the rub. The parking that was on one side is gone. And that's a case of the rock and the hard place. Well, they're a little bit off to the back, and yeah, but no, that's a constraint. It's hard, and you have to be careful. They will do terrible thing to trees. Generally, they don't have to do that. They don't have to be that terrible, but they are. Now, in this case, there's a matter of there are about 4 parking spaces there, and those would need to be replaced elsewhere. But it's a question what the parking costs and what you can get, what the trade-offs are. So it is a rock and a hard place. I'll show you another area, 3rd to 4th. A different space. This, in terms of the sidewalk, is about the worst. And, you know, it's a beautiful wall. It's a beautiful house. But the stuff they're trying to put in there really doesn't fit. On one side, you have a decent sidewalk. On the other side, you have really no sidewalk. We were walking up that street to go to Cafe Bueno, and some poor woman was just on the sidewalk ahead of us, coming the other way, and she didn't have her arms like this out or anything, but just by virtue of standing there, the sidewalk was blocked. So, you know, we all did this. She did this, and we did this. That's clearly substandard. Part of the issue is it makes no sense when you have substandard sidewalks to ask anybody to put a new building or to put a shop front on it. Here's an idea about a different way to do it. 2 11-foot travel lanes, landscape strip, and decent sidewalks. A little bit more equal on both sides. Nope. And you're supposed to laugh at this. Any Game of Thrones people? We've talked to you about the vision. We're not talking to you about the details of the code. And that's appropriate. We haven't written it yet. We have to get the vision right. But that will later be, when the winter time is here, we'll do that. I got a laugh in the studio. All right. So the good news is now we want to move to discussion and hearing from you, because we certainly didn't cover it all.
Yeah, and just to cover it and to wrap up, again, thank you for coming out. As Jeff mentioned, we go back and start writing the code. Our goal is by next spring that we'll be here, the form-based code will be here for adoption by the Mayor Board of Aldermen. So between now and then, you will see iterative versions of the form-based code. Staff will continue to put documents online that you can respond to and comment on. So Any comments we receive would be great. What we should do at some point is hand out the survey. Do you want to wait after Q&A? Yeah, why don't we, yeah, okay. So what we'll do is in back, put paper surveys that you can take and fill out. Those of you that are online, this will be posted online tomorrow. You can fill it out and there will be a way to return that. So we want to continue to get your input, make sure we're getting components of this plan right, and so it's back in your hands to give us feedback. So with that, we're going to do some question and answer, and we will, and I see one hand up already, so back there, Andrew, can I have you hang on to the mic for us? Gentleman with the green shirt in the back.
I think one of the biggest concerns. I think one of the big concerns is doesn't seem to be not only addressed but ignored and diminished was existing homeowners parking who don't have off-street parking. I know you like there's going to be one alley behind Church Street, but the area on going from 2nd up to 5th, which you're talking about taking spaces away, how would you address, for those of us like myself and many people who live around me, the only place we have to park is in front of our house. And then part of your plan is like less parking because you think it's going to be mixed use and we need less parking. So
I would say, first of all, no. And I know we talked before. I actually thought you lived in one of those houses. We're taking 4 spaces. That was taking 4 spaces off in front of one restaurant. Well, we're putting in alleys. Now, the downtown, if you live on the west side, not much is in our study area. But for any new development and in the plan, we're putting alleys behind pretty much all lots. Now, there's some existing blocks that are configured and we can't, but we're looking at ways where, and it's a completely normal and sensical situation that there's an alley in the back of the houses so that you can park. And I'm sorry if you don't have one, but we don't have the power, and I'm glad I don't, and so are you. Yeah, no, but we don't have the power to go and retrofit the existing blocks. Now, you guys might have the power because most of your blocks, your lots are really deep. And if people would just shave 12 feet off the back of their lot, they'd have that 24-foot, a really serviceable alley. They could park their cars, build a garage, have the garbage picked up behind their house.
Could there be proposal that only residents, like permit parking, can park in these places?
Now, there is a thing, but it's not going to be in the code. It's going to be a city policy.
In the code?
It is. I don't think so, but
You guys are creating the code, right?
yeah, but we don't get to, otherwise I'd have a bigger car or something.
And we can explore that.
We do, we always talk to cities about, and I believe you've already got a small residential parking permit for a small area, but that is a normal, sensible thing for a city to do as the intensity grows so that you let the people who live there. I've got a residential parking permit where I live on the east side of Capitol Hill, so I get to park free for 2 hours on street, actually right in front of my house. In a small area, I can park anytime. But that's a sensible thing, and it's part of what we're recommending. But that's so that you don't have to compete. You have a place to park, and people are just coming to have lunch or dinner or to play. They're in a different category. They've got to go look for a garage space.
Yeah, part of the idea behind shared parking is that you don't have people necessarily having to find those spots and that they have a known place that they can go. So hopefully that does start to provide some relief to the adjacent residential areas.
And we did not talk much about parking. There will be parking standards in the form-based code. Now, your current parking standards really are fairly reasonable. They might come down a little under a form-based code, but for the new construction, the requirements would shift, so a lot of the parking they build would have to be shared, which means it gets used more efficiently. So those part.
Tons of new houses, apartments, doing all these things.
And they'll-
businesses, and then we're gonna share that parking but we barely have parking now
Okay,
on
well,
the.
yeah, hold on a minute, though. This new development that comes in has its own parking. And when I talk about shared parking, that means their parking is going to be used more efficiently. Now, I can't come across the street, we can't come across the street and change your situation, but we can set up the new situation so that it's less of a problem.
Which I guess going back to, I'm sorry, I just lived there a long time, and this is a great idea, and I support it. But you can't forget about the people who live there and don't have alleys or back parking or doing these things, the opportunities. And if I could, and I really want to stress heavily, is like you were talking about Capitol Hill, and I've seen it in Old Town and many other places that these parking spaces are for permanent residents only. And if there's going to be so many other areas parking, then that shouldn't be a problem. Like, we weren't inconveniencing, nor are we trying to deter people from coming downtown and enjoying everything there because they can't park in these 10 spaces on 2nd and 4th and 5th and like 6th streets and all that, where the people who live there, live downtown, pay their taxes downtown, do everything. That's their garage. You know, that parking space in front of my house is my garage. I have nowhere else. Otherwise, I got to park anywhere else. And I don't think that it would be too much for everything you guys are going to do. I mean, you're going to be alleys. You know, you're building alleys behind people's houses. It seems that you should have the influence, or at least the suggestion, to get these residents their guaranteed parking in front of their house.
I can pretty much guarantee you that we'll recommend that the residential parking program be expanded as the city grows, but that's what we can do. We can set up the rules that'll help on the other side. It'll also help keep those people from coming and parking in the space in front of your house. But as far as that program, that's sort of, we can't do that, but you all can, and I mean, talk to your alderman and all that. But I think, you know.
You have much more influence than I do right now.
It doesn't feel that way. But I agree with you that residential parking permit is a good one. I've got one, although I'm not guaranteed, we can talk later, but I'm not guaranteed the space in front of my house, so I have to look around the block a little bit, but I've got a permit. And we should, could we move to the one right behind him, because you got the mic?
My question is simply, you were discussing that 6th Street is going to go through. Is that the one that's going to go through to East Church?
No, 7th is going to go through, and there's a development in that back corner just below East Church. That has been approved, and you saw the footprints there.
Well, they have a 7th Street already in that development. That's why I was wondering if that is going to be the one that's going to come and connect again with...
7th will connect to 7th.
I'm usually pretty loud. Okay, and 6th Street or 5th Street, are either of those going to go through the same development?
Should we
do
pull
you know?
the plan back? Well, we can see if we can get this put back. It's on of our study area, it's on the upper level. It comes in and makes that curve, because the 7th Street,
7th is already in.
Okay, that's a dead end. There are
7th
warehouses or something.
7th Street, actually, well, we can show you on a map. 7th Street will cross, directly across. There are no buildings in its way. And
So
it's-
y'all are gonna tear, let me see, yeah, so
There are no
y'all are gonna
businesses there.
tear down those businesses and put a street through there to go where?
We're not tearing down anything. I mean, you should
Okay.
take a look at the plan.
I'm sorry,
Just take
I
a
don't
look.
I don't wanna sound like an angry, crazy person here.
Here, can we pause for a second? If you wish to, can we pause?
I had a whole bunch of things going in my head when y'all were flashing this stuff. And, no, because I talk loud.
Yeah, that one will do.
Oh, okay, I don't want to sound like I'm yelling, that's why I'm saying that. I'm just saying that a lot of stuff was flashing through my head. And let me just tell you, the one thing that flashed through my head is that when my husband and I moved here in 1992, we thought we were moving to a nice, quiet community. The development has been horrendous. And one of my triggers in the beginning was affordable housing. For you living in Capitol Hill, Frederick, $1,200 a month rent for a 1-2-bedroom apartment is affordable housing. For somebody that lives in Hagerstown or maybe one of the underdeveloped neighborhoods in West Virginia, $1,200 is crazy, okay? So don't say affordable housing. Y'all need to come up with a different term. I need to come up with a different term because affordable housing is not the same from city to city. And when you bring businesses here, they need to be businesses that people can go to or that people will go to, okay? I'm sorry, I don't have all of my thoughts together because this is a lot. And y'all are talking about doing a lot. Y'all talking about tearing down the post office and building multi-use building where people will work and live. Y'all did that whole thing to the parking lot down on the parking deck between East and, what is that, South Street? Where the social services used to be, because I worked at social services. Y'all built that parking deck, and that whole bottom thing was supposed to be businesses, and there's never been a business in there. We were in that social services building for over 20 years, and there was never, ever a business leased in there until we moved, and then it was the cycle thing, and I don't even think they're there anymore. So y'all are talking about building multi-use buildings and people to have businesses underneath. That all sounds good, but y'all are talking about also putting a whole bunch of people in these things, and in all of that development, I did not see not one dang school. Not one dang school. I thank God don't have children that go to school anymore. Mine are older. But not one dang school. Where's the school for all of those children that are going to be living in those neighborhoods? And I agree with that guy said. Y'all are going to have businesses downtown, and he's not going to have a place to park. He is not going to have a place to park his car. Y'all are saying you don't have authority. You're getting ready to write a code. That code should say that he has a place to park. Okay, I thank God that my street, I have a parking driveway. But there are people that live downtown. I saw one of the pictures, and y'all were talking about extending the sidewalk. What about those people's houses? And that brick wall goes to a cemetery. That cemetery is over 200 years old. Are y'all going to be doing something to that brick wall? You can't do something to that.
Ma'am.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, but ma'am, and I want to address you respectfully and take what you say seriously. There's a boatload of misunderstandings. We're not doing anything. We're talking about a way for when the development, because the development pressures are coming. A lot of people want to live here, and that's driving prices up. And if you don't take a thoughtful plan to control that development and shape it to be the way you want it, it's going to be like CRAP, and it's going to be awful, and you're going to have all the negative aspects of it double. All the bad things are going to happen, none of the good things. And if you plan for it, and that's why we're talking about affordable housing, and it's really complicated, and there's different levels, and there's workforce housing, and then there's subsidized, and 60%, 80% of AMI, and all that. It's very complex. We're at the initial stages, but when we bring that up, it's because we hear from all these citizens and all our efforts, and we care about it to start with anyway, because it's smart. We care about that, and we're starting, people want to take that into account and make an extra effort to handle that problem. And we also brought up the issue of neighborhood affordable businesses and the people who work in it, because we're trying to push the idea there can be programs to make that better and preserve some of those people and not just push them out. So this is the starting of figuring out ways to address those problems and be smart about it. And by the way, that wall, we're not moving a big point is none of that stuff is moving because it's like God made it. It's, it's historical. It's so super valuable. We're saying we can't move it, so we have to be smart about what we do in between them. So we're trying to address those things you're talking about, and they are real issues and real tough. It's a problem, but we want to make a plan so all these things happen in the best way.
And with all of that code, where are the schools?
I'll
Where are the schools, the elementary schools?
tell you.
We need a whole new elementary.
We have other questions, and you have to be on the mic
Well,
to ask a question.
May I talk to you after this? Because the schools thing is something we've only talked about. The schools could go anywhere on this area, and it would be the community identifying and getting one of these sites. We can't say it's going to go exactly here. That's way ahead of as my grandfather would say, that's way above our breakfast. That's something for the city to do and the school board, but they can do that. They've got to acquire the land and all that. But that's an issue. This is a plan for the future, and we're just starting out. As you grow, there'll be a time when you need to respond. And they're going to get mad at me. They're going to get mad at me if we don't move on. But if you stick around, I will talk to you. Please. I would appreciate it.
Thank you for taking my question, and thank you for the presentation. Tonight's presentation proposed non-residential dwellings not to be taller than 5.5 stories, with residential and a max of 3 stories. With that said, can the committee ensure those vertical air restrictions are kept to prevent office or mixed-use skyscrapers in our community? For example, the space at the post office property, or the Monocacy building property from your proposed drawings will be prime locations for taller, and skyscrapers. I don't know who I'm speaking for, but one of the reasons we chose to build in Frederick is because of what we see right beneath the cameras above, the church steeples. So we moved here so we could get away from the skyscrapers. So is there going to be code to prevent or to help the air restrictions of those buildings going up?
Yes. Period. Actually, I won't just say period. One of the things the form-based code does is it'll set, and I'm just kind of spitballing it, for kind of Main Street, it might say on East or on Patrick, if you're going to build a building here, it'll give you a minimum height, like 2 stories, and a maximum height. And that's discussable. Is that 5 stories or 6? But I do not think we would ever go above 6, because that's the height at which it starts to be, there's a thought you can't see. If there's a person looking out a window on a balcony, you can't recognize their face. And that's kind of subjective, but that's a thing about human relations. Also, it's a place where the construction, the kind of construction they do goes from, they call it stick, but they have to switch to steel or concrete. And they don't want to build any above that unless they can go to 12 or something, because it gets so much more expensive. It's kind of a sweet spot. Well, we were not going to go above that. We're probably going to be a little bit below it. And part of the logic is you've got a skyscraper on a block. That's like it'll suck all the value and the demand for that whole block. And what you end up with is a skyscraper next to an empty lot. We want to spread that around, because as it goes along the street, like when you walk down Market, there are buildings of, some are 4-story, but they're also spread along the street. And that means it spreads the good around. You can have storefronts or windows. A skyscraper is kind of if you own that property, you'd love to sell it to a skyscraper, because you get a big boat and you're down in the Caribbean fishing all the time. But everybody else, it doesn't help. If you can develop 4 or 5-story buildings, that's value to the community. One 20-story building is not. It's value to whoever sold that property. So, yes, I went on too long, but the simple answer is you bet, and we're all for that for a lot of good reasons. And seeing the steeples above the roofs is really special. They're wonderful buildings, generally either House of God or maybe a city hall.
Oh, my turn. All right. I'm with Food Pro. How many businesses do we have here tonight, by the way, represented once again? Okay, we've got more tonight.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good. But here's my concern, and it sounds like I feel a little better listening to all of you residential. I've been in Frederick for 48 years, and a lot of you live down here and lived here for a long time. And I can see it's going to change a lot of things. We're starting to see that now. You're nervous. Where's the gentleman go? He was talking about parking. He's concerned about parking spots. I'm concerned about 160 families that are going to be moved, right? And you know what? The east side of Frederick, it's industrial. It's kind of old school. There's little houses there. But you know what? I think it's okay. You know, I think a lot of us that live there, been there for a long time, don't want to see all these changes. You know, these big buildings and complexes, you want it to be like DC. We don't want it in this section of town. You know, I said this the other night. Frederick is beautiful. I've been here my whole life. You have Baker Park, you have Market Street, you have the canal, all beautiful. Isn't there a place in every city to have an industrial area and have an area like we have right now? Isn't there a place for that? It sounds like there's not. I mean, you're coming in and you want to make all these changes. And a lot of people, by the way, there's still not a lot of people in this room that are going to be affected by this change. And they're going to be surprised when it happens. And I think we need to make sure everybody's aware of what's going on. And again, I know what you guys do, and I said this before, I've said it a million times. The reason to do this is to go into industrial area, an area that's kind of run down. They're going to revitalize it and bring it back. I don't think it's that run down there. Now, we could use some work. You know, I walked the other day, I'll tell a quick story, from Triangle Motors to Food Pro. And I have to say, it wasn't a pleasant walk, right? There could be some improvements in that area. And to me, instead of doing this grand thing where you're kicking out businesses and changing people's lives, that's what's going to happen. Let's just face it. You're going to change people's lives. We're going to leave. 160 families are going to lose their jobs. That's the reality, whether you like it or not. Or we can say, look, let's make it a little nicer, a little safer, because I'm for that. You can add some sidewalks. You can add some landscapes, some trees. You can fix up East Street to make it a little better without doing this grand venture where it changes all of our lives. And thank you. I think it's too much. Why come in an area that's not dying? It's thriving. It's a nice area. A lot of you people lived there for a long time. Do you want to see big buildings everywhere and more traffic, more people? Do you? And what about how many businesses aren't here tonight that are going to lose their little family business? Not the prettiest, but you know what? There's a value there. They employ people. Between Dairy Maid and myself, we employ 500 and some families. 500 and some families employed. Come to work there. Good jobs, good paying jobs. And you want to move that out for condos and trees and parks? Why, they're all beautiful, and I love all that. You need an area, and somewhere in a town, you need an area like this. And East Street is that area. Why do we want to change that? And then the cost is going to go up, so these people are going to move there. Affordable housing, it's a very good point. It's not affordable anymore. You're going to have condos there, $500,000 condos. Who the hell's paying for those? You know what? No one's paying for those. And then right now, people can walk to Food Pro. When we move out of town, you can't walk there anymore, you got to drive. I know you want to talk about walking and biking. Guess what? We're in downtown now. We have a lot of people that walk to our company. Not anymore. They're going to have to drive. Not good for the environment, right? So to me, you got to have a section of every city that's industrial, like East Street Corridor. And to me, don't we want to keep that? Do we want to keep that? I mean, I think a lot of people in this room want to keep that. Some don't. But I'd love to see a vote on it if you really took a poll from the business owners and every resident in that corridor, because that's a big area you're circling, a big area. Huge. I bet you that over 50% don't want it. And if over 50% don't want it, then why are we doing it? I know why we're doing it. I know why you're doing it.
My turn.
But I'm just saying the residents and the businesses, I don't think a lot of us want it. And I'm surprised. You know, at first I thought only Food Pro didn't want this, because our problem is there is values going up. I get that. Our building is very expensive. We can't just move out. We have no debt. Told the story a million times. So if we have to leave, puts a lot of debt, a lot of risk, and we could lose 160 family jobs. That's just a reality. So that's my concern. I know Dairy Maid's here tonight, Representative Belisarius. I've known Nikki for a long time. It's going to affect her business. I think we can do something to make East Street safer. Don't get me wrong. We can make it nicer. I don't think we need all this, in my opinion. Now, I know it doesn't mean much, and I know that it won't matter. I know I've been to these for 5 years fighting for this to not to happen, quietly, behind the scenes, and I've been quiet. But now I don't really care anymore because we're leaving town, Food Pro is going to move out in 10 years and be gone. But I'm concerned what's going to happen to a lot of residents around here and all these businesses. Because in 10 years from now, it's going to look totally different. And it's not what I want to see in Frederick. So that's all I have. I don't know what you guys think. But to me, I would be willing to bet that less than 50% want this, that live there too, residents as well.
Well, I would say, and you do make a lot of good points. A city does need an industrial, and there are arguments about where that goes, and is that in nearby county land? But, I mean, I have to point out, those things are happening anyway. We're talking about shaping it so the development happens in a better way. And when we show you a plan like this, the development is, okay.
Where she's at,
Okay.
where she's at.
Well, let me go.
Wait a second, that strip mall
waited.
is full.
Yeah.
It is full, it's not empty.
I know, but wait, my turn. I heard all your concerns, and you were starting to be redundant, and I'm saying your points are good. It's happening already because the development pressures are coming here. People are coming. If somebody is there anything preventing somebody from buying one of those houses or one of those businesses down on Church Street or just below it on Wisner, and putting something completely different in there, a condominium or a big house or a big business that doesn't fit. There are things, the pressure is coming. We're talking, this plan is for a way to shape it and make it good. And I would also say, I'm not worried about Food Pro and Dairy Maid or their employees. You're going to be here, you're going to stay here for 10 or 20 years. And yeah, I know you're hemmed in. You can't expand like you'd like to. We didn't, this plan didn't do that. And B, that's a done deal. This plan didn't do it. They already did it. That development you see up there on the right hand, the brown buildings, they did it, and that's not at all what this plan is doing. I am worried about businesses like yours, and that's why we're talking about trying to do something for the neighborhood businesses. And I will also point out, a lot of this is going to happen very slowly. What you see up there, that's a plan for like 2050, 2070. It's going to happen incrementally. Some pieces will happen more quickly than others. And, you do have some points. There's some concerns there.
Well, my other concern is that the business, like I said, the other night, we own the business, we own the land, I don't have a lot of debt. When I move out, which is easy to say we should move on, there's a lot of debt there and a lot of cost to us, which risks our business. So yeah, my business is at jeopardy. That's why I'm worried. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, I should be worried. And you just said I'm not as concerned, but whatever about our business is concerned about this business, which the point is we're a thriving business, and it's frustrating to have to move out.
Well, I have to point out, I know, and your problem is you're hemmed in, and you've said, if you can't expand, you're going to have to eventually move. But this plan does nothing, and very specifically the way we're writing it, it does nothing to force you out, to say you've got to leave until you want to.
Right. Well, the point was before when we
Yeah.
expanding the city. You're right. Not you.
I know.
The city said no to us expanding, which then now we're at capacity and we have to run a business, so it has crippled our business. I mean, it's business.
Yeah.
I can't grow right now, therefore I can't hire anymore. Therefore, we're at a standstill. And we own the land. By the way, we own land, so I didn't ask for a dime from the city or anything.
I know, and
So now I'm asking for an hour from the city. Whoever.
yeah, and it's a.
But we need some help because otherwise we can't.
Yep. And I will say as an individual, I'm sympathetic with that, but the city has come.
To you to say, yeah.
No, I was going to say, the city hasn't come to us. They did, but the city has come to this point, and it's moved in this direction.
I know what the city.
So we should.
Okay, I didn't actually have a question, so I didn't plan to speak, but I haven't heard a lot of questions yet. So I just want to have a quick comment as a resident of the area. I think there are a lot of residents of this area in question here, and I would like to say that just personally, I think the perspective and the impact on residents should be taken just as seriously as the impact on people who work there. And I think a lot of the discussion that I've seen is based on, strawman versus theoreticals. I didn't hear anything about tearing down existing businesses. As a resident, I would like to see a good plan for what happens. People need a place to live, and I'd like to hear a little bit more of accepting that, whether that's in the suburbs or $1 million home out in the country or here in the city of Frederick like I do. I'd like to see a plan for what happens. So I'd just like to note that I'm happy as a resident to see this.
And small point I would sort of add on to that is a lot of this new development will involve business that will have employees, shops, small shops, et cetera. I wouldn't expect these to be big businesses. I don't think IBM is going to build here, but you never know. But
You're not really driving business. You're making a bunch of little small businesses that nobody's gonna move into. Let him expand.
we're really not building anything. We're writing a code for if someone
The city is
does wanna
giving you
build.
a big chunk of money to come in here and talk to us and try to make code on how tall buildings could be, how much green space there should be, blah, 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 blah. Basically, they're talking about building houses and apartments that's gonna increase the number of residents, that's gonna impact how long it takes me to get from, East.
Can we please ask questions in an orderly fashion?
To Dollar Tree, and he can do something that can help this community by expanding his business and giving some of these people jobs. Y'all talking about building apartments that nobody is gonna be able to afford because nobody is gonna have a job here.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
One of the
Let this
other
lady
things we
get
can point
to it,
out,
and I'm sure she has something to say.
when you have development, one of the things you can do in this development is require percentage of affordable housing. One of the problems with people talk about in a town, my children can't afford to live here anymore. A large part of that, it's a supply problem. The houses, there are houses,
You're pushing him out.
no, we're not.
The city, rather, is pushing him out
Well,
to build apartments.
Jeff, we'll move to the next question.
okay.
Anybody else that agrees with what we're saying?
Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. So I didn't get my primary question answered. I own a house in Monocacy Village, and walking from Monocacy Village down East Street until you get to about maybe 4th is no man's land. You're walking over gravel parking lots, loading docks. It's dangerous. And to me, that should be the highest priority on East Street, is getting decent, safe sidewalks over there. And why didn't we see that? Is that already in the works, or?
I think we probably did a bad job, because that is an emphasis of ours. When I showed those sections and talked about, I was really focusing on the super tight sections down 4th to 3rd to 2nd, down to the creek. But the emphasis is on decent sidewalks, a good relation, so you're not walking on the sidewalk right next to speeding cars. So absolutely. And the pedestrian, good sidewalks, the length of that is our priority. We're really focused on the areas where it's super hard to do. But we've heard from so many people, and there's even the section, now the one section right in front of Food Pro, they're loading docks. Those are loading docks, and that's always going to be not the ideal pedestrian area, so you probably walk down the other side of the street. But this plan would give you wide sidewalks, street trees, a comfortable walk, and if the trees go fast, in the shade, all the way down. That's absolutely a priority of ours.
I do, just a small question relative to all these
Had a
other.
question, oh,
The 500 block of East Church Street is zoned light industrial, and there are, on the north side, there are residences. I'm just wondering if the zoning's going to change in there, or will it remain light industrial? And I've been trying to get an answer to this for the past couple of years, and nobody's been able to answer me. Will it remain light industrial? And so can I put a woodworking shop in my back lot?
Right on East Street, it wouldn't be zoned industrial. Now, you're facing East Street. It would be zoned something that would, a wood shop that would allow that. You could certainly build a wood shop. But the zoning wouldn't say this has to be industrial facing East Street. You saw the, oh, hell. I apologize. Oh, what's your cross street? What's the nearest intersection to you?
It's where 2nd Street goes off.
Oh, right at the triangle?
Yeah. Well, no, actually, it's where 3rd Street, East 3rd Street comes into Church Street there.
Like Pine Avenue.
And then Pine is the other end.
Oh, okay.
And it's light industrial, there's a restaurant there, shops.
The zoning would change, but it wouldn't preclude any of those uses. Generally, in form-based coding, it's really flexible. If you were to build a new building, it would have to be built a certain way up to the street. But what happens inside the building is generally pretty flexible in that area, recognizing the current really mixed part of it.
If it's still light industrial, I have a residence on there, I want to woodworking shop in the back. I can do that, no problem.
Absolutely. The form-based code should simplify all that. And the zoning, conventional zoning is really micromanages and has all these hyper small categories of use and density. Form-based coding has these big sloppy categories in the best way. So yeah, and also what you're doing, in your backyard, as long as you're not burning down your neighbor's garages or anything, yeah, that's absolutely the kind of thing it's going to allow. And we're going to, and that area on this side, we're looking at how the existing character, and that's going to inform how maybe a little bit extra broad it is here.
2 quick questions left.
Yeah. The question had to do with, in the final document, there's at least 3 places where they talk about traffic analysis. General traffic analysis, the road diet traffic analysis, the truck flow traffic analysis, and saying the city has to do these studies. And so I'm wondering how much of the vision and how much of the resulting coding that results from that is dependent on the outcome of those analyses. And what happens if those analyses don't happen? What does that do to all this?
Man, I wish Joel, our transportation policy guy, would. We are recommending that those be done. I think the effect would be not so much on the large-scale zoning, but on the details of the street and the streets and the connections. And Anita, do you? So we're interested in those doing too. I will tell you, we know, and it's not a matter of analysis, the idea of where the trucks go. This plan is setting up routes that'll be easier, the extension of 7th to connection, to get the trucks out of the neighborhood. And really, you give them a place where they want to go. It's easy for them to reverse and get on the bigger highways.
You will. Those basic requirements, those analyses be done in order to validate or just be sure that the vision and the resulting codes or whatever that come from that are viable, given the condition of the city.
Yeah, I can't give you an absolute answer for that. We'd like them to be done. I think it can be like a third-party validation or test.
Last question over here.
Hi. I'd actually have probably a different question. Knowing that we're discussing such an extreme change in infrastructure for the city of Frederick, I actually want to know what elected officials are actually in the room and who has actually been present this evening. I see Kelly here being represented, but I would like to know about any other elected official that's actually here to hear our concerns from a community perspective.
This is televised.
You know what? It's important to show up.
Well, I understand, you know, you're trying to, and you're negotiating. You're
So I,
negotiating, you want to get,
to further answer
do a big move.
I'm sorry, I'll close out and then let's have some conversations. But we have spoken to elected officials throughout the week leading up to this. We'll continue to have, and I'm not going to speak for them as to why they're not here or are here, but I will say we are absolutely involving as many stakeholders as we can. So
I live on East 3rd, which is definitely impacted, and I will tell you I've not talked to anybody here or anybody from the city about this.
okay, thank you for noting that. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the questions, appreciate you coming out. Do not forget to pick up a poll, a survey on your way out.